Hey guys, welcome back to another one of my videos. Please ignore the stroller in the background. That's where my senior dog likes to hang out and stay close to me. But now you already know that I will be making the CATBUS cake from Studio Ghibli's My Neighbor Totoro. It is a quintessential anime and it had to be done. But you might be wondering why CATBUS and not Totoro? Like, he's the guy that you see every time the Studio Ghibli production title card pops up for every movie. Well, even as a little kid, I was always more drawn to the CATBUS. He's not even in the movie for that long. He just meows and maybe says his next destination. But I just thought he looked really freaking cool, and I loved the concept of it so much. It just seemed really magical. If you haven't seen the movie and you don't know what the CATBUS is, I'm sure you've seen pictures of it somewhere. It's so iconic. But basically, it's like a bus that's also a cat. Or a giant cat that transports people and beings like a bus does, and you'll be watching me make a cake version out of it. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and here we go. Starting with a sketch, I'll try to press down on the paper with this pencil as hard as I can so that it picks up on the camera. Just want to get a basic feel for his shape. I feel like it's always a good launching point. And then once I'm done with the sketch, I'm using this red Sharpie pen to kind of map out where I want the wire to go. I need something to be able to support all these windows and the roof. Modeling chocolate by itself just won't hold it up. And so it looks like this, and I'm ready to get started. I'm doing a plain vanilla cake box mix, and then I added this food coloring so it gives that kind of caramel color that his fur has. I need to remember to use more flavoring going forward. I just keep forgetting. I'm so focused on achieving the color. But yes, I'm using a loaf pan because obviously he has a loaf shape being a CATBUS and all. I cut off the top portion, like where it's super raised, because I didn't need it. I just need kind of like a flat rectangle.
2 hours later.
And then I'm cutting it in half. I don't know if you can tell, but the texture is very different. It's way more crumbly, right? It's because I realized when I had cut off the top portion that the middle was not cooked all the way. So I put it back in the oven and cooked it for way too long. So that sucked, but it's okay. I'm covering it up in frosting anyways. It definitely has a tougher texture, but tough is great for sculpting and putting a lot of weight on, so I'm not crying too hard about it. I also bought this giant container of corn syrup from like Smart and Final, I think. Because I use so much of it and it's best to buy it in bulk, but it's the ingredient that I use to make my modeling chocolate clay. I'm doing a dark chocolate brown as well as a peanut butter just to match his fur coloring. I went back to the cake and I realized I need to give this guy seats. I can't just do a whole block. The biggest part about the CATBUS is that he needs seats. So this is a very messy and uncomfortable to watch clip, and I apologize about that. But this is what it looked like when I carved out the seats. I then went in with frosting to kind of reinforce all the crumbs. And then I was able to start actually laying down my first layer of modeling chocolate. I actually mixed the peanut butter chocolate with some white chocolate in order to give it a lighter color. Just wanted to give it some contrast between the inside of the CATBUS compared to the outside. Once the base was covered, I then went in and kind of etched out bus seats. I really should have watched the movie before I started working on this project. I'm so sorry that the seats are not accurate. I'll be better about it next time for sure. Then I made a big batch of Rice Krispie treat because I knew I wanted to make use of that for his head, his tail, and all 12 legs. Here's the little head I came up with. I was really nervous about his legs, but actually this was probably the most fun part I had, like being able to construct them and attach it to the body of the cat. Just goes to show you don't know until you get started. So here's what I have so far. Hello. So this is the next day. You saw what progress I made yesterday, and I had actually posted a picture of the CATBUS sketch onto my Instagram stories, and one of my friends got back to me and was just like, you have to add lights for the CATBUS eyes. And I don't know why I didn't think about that myself. It just seems so obvious now. I had previously thought about adding like additional fun features to my cake. So not just like engineering construction wise, but something that kind of makes it more exciting. The very first thing I had done and had ever done was using isomalt for the Nausicaa Omu Bug eyes. If you haven't seen that video, you have to check it out. It was probably one of my most popular cakes I had ever made, which was surprising because Nausicaa isn't like the first Studio Ghibli movie people tend to think of. It's early. I don't know, I feel like people always tend to like say Spirited Away. Anyways, I digress. So I used isomalt for the Omu eyes and it was pretty successful. In fact, that was probably the best part of it personally. Now I'm thinking I'll go with the lighted eyes and maybe make his eyeballs out of isomalt. So game plan has changed a little bit. I just bought some lights. Hopefully they come by tomorrow. If not, that's okay. But I'm gonna go ahead and cover kind of like the rest of his cake body and work on the head at the very last step so I can kind of try to fiddle around with how I'm gonna make his eyes work. But until then, let's finish out his body. Here is a giant glob of his regular fur color and then a little slightly smaller blob of brown for his fur accents. When I was really little, growing up, my parents had owned a video store. Yes, I am that old, but I would always look forward to hanging out with them at their work because I could then choose whatever movie I wanted to watch. And it was either always Totoro or Willy Wonka. I would play them on repeat, and I'm pretty sure it drove my mom absolutely crazy. But I loved it and I couldn't help it. You know, the CATBUS doesn't have a lot of airtime, but to me he felt like the most magical of all the characters. Imagining sitting on those furry seats as you ride inside a giant cat. And I wasn't a cat person growing up. I was very much more into dogs, but something about the CATBUS really draws you in, and I would just dream about it a lot. He's such a classic, iconic character despite not even showing up that much. And I think that really shows like the strength of his design and concept. It's definitely characters like this that really motivate me to make art of my own, even though I'm straight up plagiarizing. All in all, it's just super fun. Okay, so legs are all attached, and now I'm thinking about constructing like the window and roof, like the top half of the CATBUS. And this was definitely the most intimidating part. I've had this CATBUS project in my mind for quite some time, but it was really hard for me to really wrap my head around how I wanted to construct him. So I dug up my armature wire as well as the paper wrapped cake wire that I use for some projects and decided to kind of build this bridge shape so that he has a frame to support his windows. And I worked pretty slowly. Like this whole process was a lot longer than I expected to. I always think that I can finish a cake in like 3 days, but it always takes me like 5, which really isn't too bad. but it's a lot of experimenting and it's a lot of slow building. And sometimes I have to redo a lot of steps. For instance, you can see me put on the wire kind of like in diagonal, haphazard ways onto the armature wire for the top roof portion. And I thought that would be enough, like I just needed just a tiny bit of support in order for me to put on his dark chocolate roof on top. But turns out it still sags in the middle. Chocolate is heavy. I didn't want to use a giant block of it either. So you're kind of having to battle between how much chocolate to use, how much support to have. And I realized that instead of doing the diagonal shape that I thought I could save wire on, I really just need to go straight across. So I'm using way more wire, but that's okay, it's cheap. And it makes the CATBUS shape look a lot more legit. So I was beginning to work on the window frames when I realized I wasn't really happy with the texture of his roof. It just looked messy. I think one of my weaknesses when it comes to working with this material is that I can't get a real smoothness that satisfies me. So I'll just go in and put in more texture. In this case, I got my tools and kind of gave him like a fluffier, rougher, almost fur-like texture that I think I was able to pull off. It's definitely a more rustic look, but I think it looks really cute. And then I went ahead and put on the rest of the window frames. Okay, my hair is up because it is hot and I'll be working with melted sugar, which is always really nerve-wracking. I haven't done it in a while. I think the last one I did was for my no face when I made his drool. If you haven't seen that video, do check it out. But I wanted to do isomalt eyes so that the light can really shine through instead of using like regular chocolate. I actually have some leftover isomalt from the previous project, and I heard you can actually microwave it. And thank goodness for me, I have an easy to use silicone cup. So let's see how this turns out. Here it is. It's kind of yellowish, and that's probably because it's been like recooked so many times, but that's fine because it's gonna be like the headlights, so yellow totally works. I poured it into this mold that I had, and I'm actually going to try to set it where it's a little warped like that, because his eyes aren't perfectly round, they're a little bit more oval. So I just have to keep this shape for like however long it needs to set. Hopefully not too long. And then I will repeat that process for the second eye.
A few moments later.
Okay, so I didn't need to hold it the entire time. It's still pliable, but I'm able to take it out of the mold, so I could just kind of manipulate it into that oval shape without actually touching it too much. And then it comes out of the mold really easily. Here are the eyes. They're not perfectly circular or like perfectly oval, but that's okay. I'm still really happy with them. I actually melted the tops of these over the stove because apparently when you pour isomalt into silicone, it tends to leave bubbles on the surface, which it did with these. So if you have a blowtorch, you could just melt the bubbles right off. I do not have any fuel for my blowtorch, so I just held them up with chopsticks over the stove and they worked just fine, I think. Happy that these are done, and I'm gonna go ahead and continue to work on his head. Okay, the head is now mostly covered, but of course where his eyes would be are exposed. This is kind of the complicated part, the part that I'm most nervous about, because I want his eyes to light up, and I got these button lamps and they have like this little on-off switch. but I'm not able to manipulate the switch once it's inside the head. I mean, it's a pretty big device, honestly. I could have done wired LEDs, but I'm just not there yet in terms of like doing technical stuff. So I thought this was much easier. It has a 17-hour battery life, so it's not like it's gonna run out on me. But it just makes me a little nervous to do this step at the very last second, because I'll have to keep the lights on, insert them in the head, and then cover it up and finish the head design while the lights are still on. And of course, like take all the cute little pictures that I do want to take. Every molecule in my body is telling me to procrastinate, but I know I just need to dive headfirst in. So let's do this. The first thing I'm gonna do is carve out where his eyes would be so that at least these button lamps can sit comfortably inside the head. Okay, I tested out the fit of the light and it looks like the eye hole has to be this big. So not the end of the world, but a big chunk is definitely out. And all done. Looks absolutely insane right now, but that's okay. I have these lights, which I'll then cover in saran wrap before I actually finally insert them. Even though it says waterproof, I don't know, it just feels weird. So I'm just gonna wrap them in saran wrap. Messy as it is, can't even see it when it's inserted though, so should be fine. Unfortunately, my camera died, but I did put on the rest of his leg markings and covered his head in that base layer, and he's really giving me Squirtle gang right now, but that's okay. I just need to slowly build up the rest of his head. So that includes fleshing out his sides, like his sideburns, the furry bits, his jaw, his tongue, his teeth, his ears, but I'm keeping that space where his eyes would go still pretty wide open, and I'm trying real hard to not think about how those eye sockets look like where giant eyeballs would go. I'm also making the extra little details, like the little rats that are on the corners of the bus. They kind of light up the sign of where his next destination will be. And then here are those isomalt eyes. I thought I could use pen, like I'm doing on the bus sign, to make the irises, I think that's what they're called, of the eyeballs, but the pen just wasn't dark enough, so I stuck with more modeling chocolate. And here I am finally installing the lights in the eyes. And here is the completed cat bus. And with lights off, cutting into him was definitely a bit tricky because only his bottom half is cake, and there's also a bunch of wire that's going through it to stabilize the windows. Of course, his leg just popped off because that's Rice Krispie, but here's the final cake slice. And here I am trying to dig out some bit of sponge, but tasted great. And that was my CATBUS cake. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me make him. I actually didn't realize until the very end that I forgot his brake lights. There are these little purple rats, like the same kind you see next to his destination sign, but on his booty. And that's probably because I didn't have any reference pictures from his behind. I was just looking at him front facing or side facing. Sorry, my dog is stirring. So yeah, I completely forgot. And honestly, I didn't even know that he even had little rats on him until like a few years ago. It's kind of like when I found out kind of super late that Zero from Nightmare Before Christmas has a light up pumpkin nose. Like, I just had no idea. Same with the rats, but that's okay. I was really happy with the rest of him. And who knows, maybe I'll make a better, new and improved version of him in the future. That about wraps it up. I'm already starting my next cake, and yes, it's another Studio Ghibli, and you might be like, okay, you've done so many Studio Ghibli, so many ones from the same freaking movies, but there's so many characters that are just so familiar to everyone and so exciting to make. I kind of have to run the gamut with all the classic ones before I really branch out. But yeah, there's a lot to do, and I hope you guys will join me on this little journey. So don't forget to subscribe, like, and ring the bell, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.